Imagine the name you learned to write in preschool. You're like 4 years old, ripping that oversized pencil, drawing those shaky horizontal lines to form the letters.
Right, yeah.
That name is the absolute bedrock of who you are. You trace it, you respond to it, eventually you sign your first lease with it. But now imagine waking up one morning and realizing that exact same name is being used as, like, a punchline.
Or a political weapon.
Exactly. A weapon, a slur by millions of strangers on the internet every single day.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we are skipping all the pleasantries because we have a really dense mission here.
We really do.
We are delivering a comprehensive front-to-back book summary of Lena Dunham's 2026 memoir, Famesick.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
For you, the listener, who wants the profound structural insights of this book without having to wade through the entire text, well, we're extracting the core nuggets. We're looking at the brutal intersection of extreme fame, relentless chronic illness, and the literal loss of self. And to understand how you lose yourself, we really have to start at the architecture of identity itself, right? Like how you get your name in the first place.
Yeah, let's start there. Because before this author was a globally recognized brand, she was simply a kid named Lena.
Right, and the origin of an identity often begins as, well, a projection of the generation that came before. The provenance of her name is highly specific and rooted in generational trauma, honestly.
It's a really visceral story.
It is. She was named after her great-grandmother, a Russian immigrant who arrived in America with this massive brood of children, having already buried 2 or 3 of them back home.
Wow.
And the image painted in the memoir is of this woman's chubby arms, completely covered in burn marks.
From the oven, right.
Yes, from the endless repetitive labor of taking bread in and out of a hot oven just to keep her family alive. That physical scarring, that immigrant survivalism, that's the legacy embedded in the name Lena.
And then there's her mother, Lori Simmons, who had a very specific agenda when choosing that name.
Oh, absolutely.
Lori grew up in this era of assimilation, and she was saddled with a name she absolutely despised.
Right, she called them diminutive names.
Exactly. Names like Susie, Bonnie, Lori. She felt these were names designed for little girls, for supporting characters meant to just shrink into the background of a mid-century American life.
She hated that.
She really did. She believed that if she had been given a heavier historical name like Lena, her life would have inherently commanded more glamour, more authority.
So she projects all that ambition onto her daughter.
Yeah, she wants a name that sounds like it belongs to either a movie star or a high-powered, ruthless lawyer.
She even refused to give her daughter a middle name.
Really? Just the first and last?
Yeah, she viewed a middle name as a frivolous distraction. Just Lena Dunham.
No.
And the psychological setup here is fascinating because for the first 2 decades of her life, the author carried that name with immense pride.
Like it was a badge of honor.
Exactly. She used it as a marker of exceptionalism. She'd announce her lack of a middle name as if it were this, badge of artistic purity. She signed her high school poetry with it. It was the absolute container for her entire ego.
But I want to introduce a mechanical way to think about what happens next. Think about your own identity as like a legal trademark.
Okay, I like this analogy.
When you invent a product, you trademark it so no one else can dilute the brand, right? You control the messaging. But in the landscape of modern fame, you lose the trademark to your own literal name.
You really do. It becomes public property.
Yeah. The author describes this phenomenon where her name ceased to be a marker of her own excellence and just morphed into a piece of public domain property. Millions of people suddenly used it to project their own anger about millennials, their political frustrations, body image insecurities.
It's a huge burden.
How does the human brain process the reality that its primary identifier has been hijacked like that?
Well, the clinical literature defines this as a form of identity dissociation. It's often triggered by severe environmental stress. The brain essentially builds a firewall, to protect the core self from the public avatar.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when she heard her give a name in the media, it was framed in such unnerving or violent or just mocking contexts that she felt she could no longer inhabit it safely.
It felt like watching a character in a film she didn't write.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the psychological response to this was to start adopting fake aliases.
Right.
By the time she was 26, her daily life required the use of names like Rose O'Neill, Renata Halpern, Lori Reynolds, Ruth Stein.
She used those names for everything, right? To check into Hyatt hotels, to order room service, set up her cable bill, and eventually check into hospitals and rehab facilities.
Yeah.
Obviously, anyone with a high profile needs a security buffer. But she explicitly notes this wasn't just about dodging paparazzi in a doorway. I struggle to understand the emotional relief of this, though. Like, why does pretending to be Renata to a hotel clerk who literally doesn't care who you are provide such a profound sense of comfort?
Because it offers the illusion of a blank slate.
Ah, okay.
When you're a public figure, every interaction is preloaded with the other person's assumptions about you.
Yeah.
If you are Renata Halpern, you are just a woman ordering a club sandwich.
Right, you're nobody.
Exactly. You have no history, no public failures, no controversies. It's a vacation from the self. She observes that while her life appeared to the outside world to be overflowing with absolute freedom, wealth, creative control, celebrity,
Yeah.
internally, she was entirely trapped by the brand of her own name. Choosing an alias was a desperate psychological bid to reclaim the basic human gift of choice.
Just to choose how you are perceived, even if it's just for a 5-minute phone call?
Precisely.
That concept of a life, what did she call it? Lousy with freedom. It brings up an incredible contradiction. Because before the name became a prison, it was the vehicle for immense, almost reckless ambition.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
want to look at the machinery of how that fame was built in the first place, starting with the hubris of her early 20s. Imagine being 20 years old, home on summer break from a Midwestern liberal arts college, and deciding you possess the necessary genius to make your first short film.
The premise of that early film acts as a startling psychological precursor to her later life, honestly.
Tell me about it.
So she cast her own family and shot it in their home. The narrative centered on a tyrannical teenage art dealer played by her sibling, who basically ruled an entire gallery ecosystem with an iron fist.
Barking orders at adults 3 times her age, right?
Yeah. And while she framed it as a satire, the author later recognizes it as a prescient, almost unconscious vision of her own impending future. It is the ultimate manifestation of youthful hubris, this unshakable belief that your perspective is so vital it demands documentation.
And fast forward just 4 years, she is 24 years old. She has a piece of paper taped to her office door that reads, Lena Dunham, writer and director, The Untitled Lena Dunham Project.
It's wild.
You might have experienced a micro version of this when you get your first big promotion at work, that mix of pride and sheer terror. But at that time in the television industry, 24-year-old women did not get handed their own shows.
No, definitely not.
They certainly didn't get to act in, direct, and produce them all at once. The industry standard was to pair a young voice with an older, established luminary to act as the actual adult in the room.
But she was the adult in the room.
Exactly.
Right.
And she internalized a terrifying oath. She believed that if she failed, it wouldn't just be her personal failure, but a failure for all womankind.
Which is a crushing cognitive load for a developing prefrontal cortex, by the way.
I can't even imagine.
The trap of being labeled a generational voice is that it eliminates the margin for error. She believed that every misstep, every flighty decision, would be weaponized by the industry as an excuse to resume the patriarchal status quo.
Right.
The shame of making a normal 24-year-old mistake was magnified into a betrayal of her entire gender.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Is it an act of extreme narcissism or an act of extreme burden to legitimately believe that the success or failure of your HBO comedy dictates the societal progress of an entire gender? I mean, it sounds borderline delusional.
Well, it requires a profound duality. The narcissism is the prerequisite engine, right? You need that level of ego to have the audacity to demand millions of dollars to film your own thoughts in the first place.
Fair point.
But the burden is the exhaust fume that poisons you. You cannot carry the metaphorical weight of womankind without fracturing your immediate reality. And we see that fracture happen instantly within her family dynamic, caused by the media's flattening of identity.
Yeah, the media flattening was absolutely brutal. Gawker was at the height of its power then, and they stripped her castmates of their individual identities, reducing them to nepotistic labels.
Allison Williams became Brian Williams' daughter.
Right, and Zosia Mamet was David Mamet's daughter. Meanwhile, Adam Driver is out there pointing out that his father manages a Kinkel's in Indiana, asking if that counts for absolutely nothing in the narrative of privilege.
It's so dismissive.
But the collateral damage to her parents was the most severe, I think.
Oh, without a doubt. Her parents had spent their entire adult lives meticulously crafting a very specific identity, the gritty, hard-working, hand-to-mouth New York artists.
Yeah, they took pride in figuring out how to survive on the margins.
Exactly. And suddenly, because of their daughter's polarizing mainstream success, that hard-fought narrative was violently overwritten by the public.
They just became the enablers.
Yeah, the media painted them simply as Lena Dunham's artist parents, like
Oh.
wealthy, left-wing eccentrics who produced a sex-obsessed narcissist. Her father despised the label. Her mother would frantically defend their hand-to-mouth history.
But the internet doesn't care.
No, the internet does not possess the processing power for nuance. It requires archetypes. By forcing her parents into the archetype of the enablers, the machinery of fame began undoing the threads that kept their family intact.
And while her family's identity is being rewritten, she is just marinating in the toxicity of the early internet. Early
Yeah.
Instagram, the Wild West of Twitter.
A terrible place to be.
She is obsessively reading critiques of her weight, her physical face, her grating voice, and how does a 20-something under immense pressure respond? By engaging in a behavioral loop that looks joyful, but is actually deeply destructive.
It really is.
Whenever she read something horrific about herself, she would immediately post a goofy, carefree picture with a clever caption.
Right, and the clinical term for seeking out this kind of abuse is digital self-harm. But her response mechanism adds another layer.
How so?
Because by posting those goofy photos, she wasn't actually proving her resilience. As she later admits, she was actively begging the void for an ounce of praise to counteract the ache of the world's disdain.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. She was voluntarily filling her psyche with the public's hatred, and then turning around and begging those exact same people to provide the cure. It's an impossible, self-defeating feedback loop.
Which acts as the perfect catalyst for the central pathology explored in this memoir. She calls it fame sickness.
Fame sickness, yeah.
And the tone of the book is established immediately in the dedication. It isn't dedicated to her family or a mentor. It's addressed to a tragic roster of dead celebrities. Amy Winehouse, Chris Farley, Marilyn Monroe, Heath Ledger.
All the heavy hitters.
She dedicates the book to anyone who was, quote, too famesick to be cured.
And, to understand fame sickness, we have to examine the bedrock mythology of American culture. From childhood beauty pageants to talent shows to the enduring fantasy of being discovered by a scout at a local mall. Society is predicated on the idea that being chosen for glory is the ultimate salvation.
Mm.
We're conditioned to believe that visibility equals invulnerability. Therefore, society views fame as a self-inflicted privilege.
Exactly. When you achieve the thing everyone is supposedly striving for, you forfeit your right to complain about the consequences.
You do.
When a famous person says, "This visibility is destroying my mental health," the public fundamentally cannot compute the statement. They react with vitriol because the suffering of the celebrity challenges the core American myth that success cures human pain.
If the person at the top of the mountain is miserable, what hope is there for the rest of us?
Exactly. And that societal resentment creates a profound social isolation, which bleeds directly into the celebrity's intimate, real-life friendships.
Her friends looked at her life, the financial security, the professional adulation, the aesthetically pleasing boyfriend, and they assumed she had solved the puzzle of existence.
So they just stopped checking in.
Yeah, as a result, they simply stopped asking her questions about her inner emotional life.
The isolation produces some of the most gut-wrenching anecdotes in the book. Think about your own birthday. You expect your friends to rally around you, right?
Of course.
She throws a birthday party for herself, but she is on doctor-mandated vocal rest because the sheer stress of her life is causing her to physically lose her voice.
It's literally shutting her body down.
So she attends her own party, communicating with her closest friends by scribbling on a notepad. And how do her friends react? Do they see a friend struggling with a stress-induced physical ailment?
No, they interpret it entirely through the distorted lens of celebrity. They view her silence not as a medical necessity, but as an attention-seeking affectation.
That's so cool.
They whisper behind her back, questioning why she even bothered to show up if she was going to refuse to speak. This is the cognitive dissonance of fame sickness, right? To her, showing up to a loud party without a voice was an agonizing proof of her loyalty to them.
And him.
To her friends, it was merely proof of her own grandiosity, like a performance art piece designed to make her the center of attention.
And the cruelty doesn't stop at misinterpretation. It devolves into active middle school level bullying among adults. She describes this game her friends played called phone roulette.
Oh, this part was hard to read.
It really was. She's sitting alone at home one night, and a woman she loves deeply calls her. The friend says a slightly awkward hello, and in the background, there is the unmistakable sound of a group of women giggling.
Uh,
10 minutes later, the friend calls back, weeping uncontrollably. She confesses that she is currently at a dinner party attended by every single woman the author considers a close friend. They had excluded her, spun a literal wheel to see who they should prank call, and landed on her as a joke.
it's just devastating. And why do adults behave this way toward a peer?
I really don't know.
Because she no longer fit the established social order. Her peers were still navigating the messy, obscure 20s, getting high, making mistakes, struggling to pay rent.
While she was running a massive show.
Exactly. She was the boss of 200 people on a massive television set. They couldn't reconcile her power with their shared history, so they resorted to exclusion to regain a sense of superiority. The only peer she had left was her co-star Jemima Kirk, simply because they were strapped into the exact same bizarre roller coaster, dealing with the exact same dissonance.
But, the body always keeps the score. You cannot subject the human nervous system to that level of social isolation, public scrutiny, and professional pressure without biological consequences.
No, the body will eventually force you to stop.
The stress begins to manifest physically. Right before a highly anticipated glamorous cover shoot for Vogue magazine, she breaks out in shingles across her stomach and impetigo across her face.
And the physiology here is important. Chronic stress hyperactivates the HPA axis, flooding the body with cortisol, which eventually suppresses the immune system.
It's a total system failure.
Yeah, shingles is a reactivation of the chickenpox virus lying dormant in the nerves. It feels like localized fire. And impetigo is a highly contagious bacterial skin infection. She specifically notes that impetigo is the exact same infection that covered Amy Winehouse's face in those infamous paparazzi photos documenting her downfall.
That parallel is chilling. She is standing in front of a mirror with a waterfall of golden, weeping blisters turning green on her face and burning sores on her abdomen, and she is expected to go put on couture gowns and project the image of a thriving generational voice.
The pressure is unimaginable.
She describes feeling like a fundamentally bad purchase, a faulty doll that needed to be sent again and again to the American Girl Doll Hospital for repairs.
Right.
She looked at her peers, the Emmas, the Jens, the Bries who seemed to glide through the galas, the press junkets, and the borrowed gowns with effortless grace, and she was haunted by why she was biologically incapable of functioning in that same rarefied atmosphere.
And that realization that her biology was incompatible with her environment transitions us from the stress-induced elements into the deeper structural betrayal of her body.
Yeah.
Because the rashes were just the warning lights on the dashboard.
Right, the engine itself was failing.
Exactly.
We're talking about her long, agonizing public battle with severe endometriosis. Let's set the timeline here. It's the spring of 2016. She is turning 30. She is actively grieving the death of her uncle, a man who bore a striking resemblance to her father and used to buy her aggressively preppy clothes with pink whales on them.
Yeah.
Amidst this grief, she receives an award from the Endometriosis Foundation of America. Today, reproductive health is discussed fairly openly on social media, but she points out that just a decade ago, talking publicly about your uterine lining was considered deeply taboo, especially in Hollywood.
Oh, absolutely. Illness is viewed as a liability in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
The illusion of the celebrity requires an invincible, sleek, perpetually reliable physical form.
You can't be sick.
Right. When she began speaking openly about the debilitating pain of endometriosis, she received secret, panicked phone calls from highly iconic female celebrities.
Wait, really?
Yes, these women suffered from the exact same disease, but they were terrified to admit it publicly because their entire personal brands and their earning potential were built on the myth of physical perfection.
And her case was exceptionally severe. She goes in for a grueling surgery. Imagine the vulnerability of waking up in a hospital recovery bay. You're swaddled in heated blankets. Your brain is foggy from propofol. She looks at her boyfriend, Jack, and asks what the surgeon found.
And her fear here is so telling.
It really is. She admits a terrifying psychological truth. Her biggest fear wasn't what they would find. Her absolute biggest fear was what they wouldn't find.
Right, she wanted physical proof.
She was terrified the doctor would declare her pelvic cavity perfectly healthy, which would mean the excruciating pain ruining her life was entirely a fabrication of her own mind.
And that fear of being dismissed as hysterical, which is a term historically weaponized against women with pelvic pain, it's often as traumatizing as the disease itself.
Definitely.
But the validation she received was brutal. Jack takes off his glasses, his face completely crumples, and he informs her that the surgeon removed 37 distinct lesions.
37.
37. They were covering her bladder, her liver, her abdominal wall, her spine. The medical staff was baffled that she'd even been able to walk, let alone direct a television show. And Jack leans over her hospital bed and begins sobbing, repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry."
In her vulnerable, drug-addled state, she interprets his tears as an apology of guilt. She assumes he's saying, "I am sorry I didn't take your complaints of pain more seriously."
But that wasn't it.
No, looking back with the clarity of a decade, she decodes the true meaning of that breakdown. He wasn't apologizing for his past skepticism. He was looking at a future dictated by severe chronic illness, and he was saying, "I am sorry you have to live with this, and I am sorry that I cannot live with this."
It raises a profound question about the limits of partnership. Like, how do you maintain an equal romantic relationship when one person's physical body is fundamentally breaking down?
Especially when it requires endless caretaking, all while playing out on a global stage.
Right, the illness wasn't a private tragedy, it was a public spectacle.
Just look at the 2017 Met Gala, the pinnacle of fashion and celebrity status. She attends shortly after undergoing yet another surgery. Her body simply cannot handle it, and she faints.
Unsurprising, honestly.
She has to be discreetly evacuated through the subterranean bowels of the museum. And where's her partner, Jack, during this medical emergency?
He is in a recording studio working with the pop star Pink.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had previously warned her that it was too soon after surgery to attend the gala. When she went anyway, the implication of his absence was clear. If she refused to heed his advice and manage her own physical limits, he was no longer going to disrupt his professional life to manage the consequences of her collapse.
The partnership had just fractured? So instead of a partner, a museum security guard has to meet her at the emergency room just to collect the incredibly expensive borrowed jewelry she was wearing.
What a surreal image.
It is. She is eventually driven back to her parents' house. Her father is carrying her glamorous Met Gala gown in a massive black trash bag. They walk into the lobby, look up at the television, and there is a brutal news chyron flashing across the screen. Lena Dunham rushed to hospital from 2017 Met Gala.
And her dad's reaction.
Her dad stares at the screen and just flatly says, "Well, that happened."
The author draws a brilliant, mechanical analogy here to explain her reality. She identifies a maddening circularity shared by both chronic illness and mass fame. It operates like an autoimmune disease of public relations.
Okay, unpack that for us.
In medicine, when you have a severe illness, you take a drastic medication. That medication causes a severe side effect, say liver damage, which then requires another drastic intervention to treat, creating an endless loop of compounding bodily trauma.
And fame operates on the exact same mechanism.
It really does.
If you make a public misstep, you deploy a massive PR intervention. You issue an apology. But that apology inevitably offends a new demographic, which sparks a secondary controversy, requiring you to hire a crisis manager to handle the fallout from the apology.
The cure causes the disease.
Both getting physically sick and getting intensely famous require constant, drastic interventions that only breed more complex, uncontrollable complications.
And when the physical complications compound to a certain threshold, the psychological architecture begins to collapse. The destruction of her biological body eventually catalyzed the complete destruction of her public judgment and her capacity for empathy.
Now, I want to be extremely careful and clear here. We are about to discuss a massive public relations crisis, which is referred to in the book as the Big Bad.
Right.
We were examining this event strictly through the lens of the psychological mechanics described in the source text. We are not taking sides, endorsing viewpoints, or litigating the external controversy. We are looking solely at how a failing body impacted a human mind.
Absolutely. The Big Bad centers on a public statement she co-wrote with her producing partner, Jenny, defending an accused friend. The revelation she presents in the memoir is chilling in its implications for human agency.
It really is.
She states that she has virtually no memory of actually writing the statement. It was drafted over text messages mere hours after she had returned home from another hospital stint.
And her mother recognized the cognitive disconnect immediately. Her mom tried to physically wrestle the phone out of her hand, screaming, "This isn't you."
Wow.
And the author writes that she wondered who it was then. She felt as though the original Lena Dunham had quietly died during one of the surgeries, and an entirely different, colder entity had been reincarnated into her failing body. She introduces a concept here that completely reframes how we think about pain. She calls it the narcissism of pain.
Yeah, we culturally define narcissism as an ego-driven obsession with one's own greatness or beauty. But she argues that severe, unremitting physical and emotional distress acts as the ultimate narcissistic force.
How does that work neurobiologically?
Well, neurobiologically, chronic pain hijacks the brain's processing power. It shrinks a person's entire universe strictly to the boundaries of their own suffering body. She writes, I was so deep in my own distress that I had ceased to be able to imagine or invest in anyone else's. Empathy had left me.
It's a staggering tragedy. Here is a woman whose entire creative genius, her entire billion-dollar career was built on the foundation of radical empathy, right?
Yes, the ability to acutely observe, understand, and replicate the subtle nuances of human behavior.
And suddenly she is completely blind to the feelings, the trauma, and the realities of other people. She compares the hovering threat of her illness to an H.P. Lovecraft monster that had circled her for 7 years, finally descended, ate her alive, and sucked the guts right out of her.
The literal biological culmination of this internal hollowing out is her decision to undergo a hysterectomy. She has reached the absolute end of her endurance. The pain is unmanageable. She sits in the office of her surgeon, Dr. Second, and begs him to remove her uterus. Take the whole thing, she demands.
But Dr. Second pushes back with incredible philosophical weight. He really does. He is a surgeon, but he warns her against the surgery. He tells her that he only removes a woman's uterus if there is absolutely zero other medical recourse. Right. He explains his reasoning. Inside the uterus is the woman herself, her spirit, her passion. It is like reaching inside and yanking out her very soul. He tells her he has watched countless women change into people they don't even recognize after the organ is removed. He is warning her about the loss of the self.
And her internal response to his warning highlights the absolute bedrock of her despair. She hears a medical professional tell her she might lose her soul, and her immediate thought is, since when did I recognize myself?
She thought it was already gone.
Exactly. She felt that the essence of who she was had already been evacuated by the pain, the fame, and the public vitriol. If her soul was already gone, the uterus was just a diseased organ causing her agony.
That terrifying mindset, the belief that you have nothing left to lose because the core of you is already gone, it leads directly into an era of total chaotic self-destruction.
The rock bottom.
The aftermath of the hysterectomy is rock bottom. Think about the anchors in her life. Girls has ended, taking her career identity. Jack is gone, taking her romantic anchor. Her uterus is gone, taking a foundational biological anchor. She is adrift in a dangerous rebound period.
And the psychology of the rebound is a textbook study in seeking false control. She begins dating a 40-year-old man named Nick, whom she met at a high-end, sober living facility.
Which sounds like a wild place.
Oh, it's described as a surreal purgatory filled with pink-haired former heroin users and wealthy, coked-out bankers. Nick acts as the charismatic leader of this island of misfit toys, but the critical detail is that Nick is actively using drugs.
And she knows he is using. She is fully aware. She literally drives him to the clinic so he can take his court-ordered urine tests.
Yes.
When the test predictably comes back positive for alcohol, Nick looks at her and claims it triggered a false positive because he used hand sanitizer on a small cut.
And she just believes it.
The former boss of a television empire just nods and thinks, sure. I have to ask, why does a highly intelligent, wealthy, famous woman attach herself to an active addict who is living in his mother's house?
Because when your own internal environment is completely spinning out of your control, the human brain seeks out an external environment it can manage.
Oh, I see.
Finding someone who is visibly, objectively worse off than you, like a project you can theoretically save, manage, or fix, well, it provides a powerful illusion of control. She was funneling all of her desperate need for order in his direction so she wouldn't have to look at the wreckage of her own life.
But the physical wreckage of her body violently interrupts this delusion. 2 weeks into dating Nick, they are having sex, and she suddenly feels the sensation of a dull knife twisting violently inside her abdomen.
Ouch.
She had physically ripped her internal surgical stitches.
At 31 years old, a globally recognized creator has to scream for her mother to call an ambulance. They're rushed to the Lenox Hill emergency room, a hospital where the medical staff literally knows her by her first name.
Which is just so embarrassing.
The cognitive dissonance of the scene is staggering. Her mother is standing in the ER, yelling at a young medical intern. Let's cut to the chase. She started having sex way too early, but it seemed to improve her mood. Just check if she ripped her stitches.
It's the darkest possible irony. You have a woman who recently employed hundreds of people, who controlled massive budgets and cultural narratives, acting exactly like a helpless, grounded teenager trying to hide a mistake from her helicopter mom.
Yeah, she sneaks a kiss from Nick in the back room of the ER and panics, thinking she needs to hurry before her mom forces her to take a Percocet and go to bed.
And the mention of Percocet highlights the true danger of this period. The drug haze she falls into is thick and chemically terrifying.
It's a dangerous mix.
She's surviving on a daily cocktail of Klonopin to numb the anxiety, Adderall to forcefully counteract the sedative effects of the Klonopin so she can function, heavy pain medication for the surgical trauma, and thick marijuana blunts that Nick smokes constantly.
The physiological whiplash of that cocktail is insane.
Yeah.
You're forcing your central nervous system to accelerate and crash simultaneously.
Exactly. The central nervous system is in a state of absolute conflict.
She admits that the only fleeting moments she felt free were when the precise alchemy of the blunt and the pills hit her bloodstream just right while she was being intimate with Nick. Every single in-between moment, the reality of waking life was characterized by pure, unadulterated terror.
The desperation for normalcy reaches absurd heights. In January, they enact a fake engagement, complete with a ring, purely to feel tethered to the societal script of a normal life.
It's just play acting.
Meanwhile, Nick stops paying rent at his sober living facility and just moves into the back room of her parents' house. But the facade finally, entirely shatters in public. The breaking point happens at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas.
She is scheduled to speak on a highly intellectual panel discussing politics and narrative. She's supposed to be the voice of authority. But an hour before she is due on stage, where is she?
She is on her hands and knees, vomiting onto the cool tile floor of a convention center public bathroom.
Oh, man.
Her physical presentation is a manifestation of her internal collapse. She is wearing a bedazzled leopard print maxi skirt. She has absolutely no makeup on. Because of hormone-induced baldness, she has hair extensions glued directly to her scalp, but she has scraped all of it up into a tiny, chaotic sprout on the top of her head that her father affectionately but sadly calls a broccoli top.
That paints quite a picture.
She walks out onto the stage looking completely unhinged, and the media's reaction proves how entirely disconnected public perception is from reality. The Daily Mail runs a story the next morning praising her natural makeup-free style, completely failing to recognize the severe life-threatening depression unfolding in high definition.
After surviving the festival, she flies back to Los Angeles and visits her doctor. She complains of chronic nausea, vaguely attributing it to low iron, and casually mentions to the doctor that she might be taking slightly too much Klonopin.
And that's when it happens.
This is the moment the intervention is triggered. Her producing partner, Jenny, calls in their mutual producer, Eileen. Eileen walks into the room, takes one look at her face, and starts shouting, "You eyes are pinged out. Your eyes have been pinged out."
Dunham writes that she deeply resented hearing it, but she couldn't formulate an argument because of a terrifyingly simple truth. I can't see my own eyes.
Wow.
She had lost the ability to accurately perceive her own deterioration. Jenny gently suggests that she go away for a month to, quote, do some arts and crafts.
R2 crafts.
The author's detachment from reality was so severe that she genuinely thought Jenny was suggesting a luxury spa vacation or a summer camp for anxious millennials.
She had no idea she was being sent to rehab.
None. Her mother vehemently rejects the idea, blaming Jenny for the entire situation, but the seed is planted, the intervention is successful, they get her to a rehabilitation facility.
Which initiates the final arc of the narrative. The journey out of the darkness, characterized by surrender. And the turning point doesn't happen in a dramatic therapy session.
Where does it happen?
It happens in a moment of profound, quiet observation outside the rehab clinic.
Right. She is sitting on the concrete steps of the facility with a fellow patient named Galen. Galen is reading a book about healing crystals. Suddenly, Galen starts shouting, "Lena! Lena!" and points to the grass.
And what's there?
Nestled in the lawn is a robin's egg. It is incredibly vivid, so vibrantly blue that it looks like it must have been artificially dyed. Dunham looks at it and asks a question that reveals her entire worldview. Who put it there?
Galen just laughs at her and says, "Nobody put it there, it just is." That phrase, "it just is," represents the exact antithesis of the narrative control she had been obsessed with her entire adult life.
She was always trying to direct everything.
She had spent a decade trying to write, direct, produce, and control the meaning of every interaction, every photograph, every headline, every relationship. To look at that egg and accept that it existed perfectly without authorship, without an agenda, without a PR strategy, was the ultimate psychological breakthrough.
It was a huge shift for her.
It was a symbol of her finally looking outward, noticing a world that existed independently of her own flattened, laminated identity.
But the lesson in surrender requires one final brutal test. Because while she may have accepted the egg in the grass, she is still fiercely trying to control her own biological destiny. She still wants a child.
Even after everything.
At 34 years old, possessing only one functioning ovary and no partner, she embarked on the grueling process of in vitro fertilization.
The medical establishment categorizes her as a solo starter. She makes the pragmatic, loving decision to use the sperm of a close, trusted gay friend. But she runs face first into the absurd bureaucracy and inherent biases of the fertility industry.
It's ridiculous.
The clinic officially and hilariously classifies her friend's donation as a user of fresh homosexual sperm, providing FDA-ineligible jizz.
FDA-ineligible jizz. I mean, she points out the insane hypocrisy of the system.
Oh, absolutely.
If she had pulled a random active drug addict off the street, brought him into the clinic, and lied that they were in a heterosexual relationship, the doctors would have congratulated her and proceeded immediately.
But because she meticulously selected a brilliant, accomplished friend who happened to be gay, she is subjected to endless bureaucratic roadblocks.
She is forced to pay thousands of dollars in legal fees to draft boilerplate contracts that anticipate bizarre scenarios, like them both dying simultaneously in a fiery plane crash.
She endures the legal hurdles. She subjects her fragile body to the brutal regimen of hormonal injections, and she waits. And the final blow arrives on a deeply isolating day.
It was Memorial Day weekend, right?
Memorial Day weekend, during the height of the global pandemic. The world is already shut down. She receives a phone call from her fertility specialist, Dr. Koperman. The news is absolute. Not a single one of her frozen eggs was viable. Zero.
The biological door is permanently shut. And it is in the devastating quiet of that realization that the ultimate acceptance finally takes root.
It really does.
She writes beautifully about the exquisite, exhausting cost of having spent years dividing her identity into marketable pieces to survive the public eye. The little whore persona versus the Jack's baby girl persona. The needy slut versus the loving wife. The grateful fat girl versus the relentless feminist boss.
She realizes she simply lacks the spiritual endurance to continue the performance. It hurt too much to constantly cleave herself into fractions.
By accepting the finality of her biological limits, she inadvertently gives herself permission to stop performing altogether.
She writes, "I just wanted to be in my body, and there I was."
It completely validates the core thesis of the book. Think about what she writes regarding the infantilizing nature of celebrity. A hospital is no match for a girl who has had her bananas peeled for her schedule announced instead of discussed. Fame regressively turns adults into toddlers whose every whim is catered to.
But the ultimate undefeated equalizer is human biology.
Precisely. She states it plainly. Celebrity is no match for illness.
Fame is not a magical talisman that protects you from the human condition. Millions of Instagram followers cannot stop your cells from mutating. Wealth cannot prevent your organs from failing. And no amount of cultural influence can force a frozen egg to fertilize.
Biology overrides celebrity every single time.
Her salvation wasn't a miraculous physical cure. It was finding profound peace in her complete lack of control. She accepted that she is a person who is sometimes incredibly sad, and that being sad is an acceptable way to exist in the world.
Let's pull back and look at the sheer scope of the journey we've just unpacked today.
It's a lot.
We started by examining the hubris of a 20-year-old girl, convinced that shooting a short film in her parents' living room was a necessary step for the advancement of womankind. We followed her into the absolute meat grinder of millennial fame, watching as her very name was legally and emotionally stolen from her, forcing her to hide behind aliases just to order room service.
And then the physical toll.
Right. We explored the devastating, isolating reality of chronic illness, the terrifying loss of empathy brought on by severe pain, the chaotic descent into drug addiction, and finally, the ultimate humbling reality of losing the biological ability to carry a child.
It serves as a profound, meticulously documented deconstruction of the American myth. It proves that being chosen for glory does not solve the fundamental vulnerabilities of the human condition. It merely amplifies them under a microscope.
Which leaves me with a final, provocative thought for you to ponder. Think about your own life. We spend an immense amount of time and energy curating our identities.
You really do.
We carefully build our resumes, we polish our personal brands on LinkedIn and Instagram, we try so hard to make a name for ourselves, just like Lori Simmons desperately wanted for her daughter. But if a simple biological misfire, a buildup of scar tissue, a faulty uterine lining, a misfiring nerve, if that can fundamentally alter your judgment, completely erase your empathy, and entirely shift your place in the social order.
What do we really have?
Exactly. How much of your meticulously curated identity is actually just a temporary luxury afforded to you by good health?
It is a terrifying but deeply necessary question to ask ourselves.
If the biological machinery of your life breaks down tomorrow, who are you in the muddy waters that remain? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material.